دایی یه فرصت خوب حالا پشت مدافعان خداداد عزیزی توی دروازه گل برای ایران. خداداد عزیزی باز هم روی زمین گشت سرداران بود و توی دروازه بود گل به نام آزمونده برای ایران.
بزنه کریم انصاری گل توی دروازه کریم انصاری دروازه پرتغال باز شد.
علی دایی سام توپ توی دروازه گل.
اشتباه حرکت از کوچان نژاد فرصت برای کوچان نژاد توی دروازه گل برای ایران.
Welcome back to Bezan podcast. My name is Arya Allahverdi. In today's episode, we have interviews with experts from Iran's Asia Cup opponents in Group C. For the UAE, we have John McAuley from the national newspaper in the UAE. For Hong Kong, we've got Tobias Susser from offsideHK. And lastly, from Palestine, we've got Bassil and Mikdadi from FootballPalestine.com. Sure to check out our last episode as well, where our panel spoke about everything regarding the national team and Iran's perspective of Group C. Be sure to leave a like, rating, and subscribe to us on YouTube and all other podcast platforms. Our social media is @GoalBezan, and hopefully enjoyed the episode. Right, I'm joined by John McAuley from the national newspaper in the UAE. We had you on before. John, how you doing, my friend?
Yeah, very well, Arya. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you back on. John, just speak to us about yourself and the work that you do out in the UAE for the national.
Yeah, the main focus would be the UAE national team or UAE football in general, to be honest. But as you can imagine, a lot of stuff happening in the past 2 years with the national team. So the main focus would be that, as I said, and just following the trials and tribulations of the Whites and their failed attempt to get to the last World Cup, which was unfortunate for everybody here. And there's been quite a lot of change and unpredictability with the national team at the minute. So, yeah, really things kicking back into action after the Asian Cup draw. But as I said, I would concentrate mostly on that and then dip into a few other sports as well for the national.
Great stuff. Appreciate that. John, let's speak about the UAE national team then. So since we last played you guys in the qualifiers, what's changed? What updates regarding the national team?
It's probably easier to say what hasn't changed, to be honest. They're in quite a state of flux at the minute, in truth, because I'm not too sure how aware you are, but just the day of the draw, actually, I was over at the draw in Doha about 10 days ago. News filtered through that the president of the Football Association was resigning, which was later confirmed the next day. So there's a huge change there at the very top level of the national team, which is obviously going to filter down to the national team itself, the top of the federation, I should say. So, yeah, the board, we've got a temporary board in place at the moment. And the knock-on effect of that, even though that this decision had already been taken, is that the UAE will be looking for a new manager. Rodolfo Arya is not staying on. He's left. His contract was initially to run through until the Asian Cup, and obviously we all thought that was going to be this July. But now that the tournament's been pushed back, rescheduled, we've got a new slot for it at the start of the year instead of the summer. The FA decided that they would not continue with Rodolfo. And Rodolfo, it was very amicable, to be honest. So they both agreed to part company. Excuse me. And then yeah, it's been a pretty manic last week with we got a temporary board in place. There's obviously regulations and different procedures that need to be gone through for a new board to come into fruition and to have a new president ahead of that. So as I said, it's probably easier to say to you what's not changed, but it's two pretty seismic events in UAE football whenever you're looking at the national team, especially with this Asian Cup that's going to come around very quickly.
Yeah, and UAE's always been one of the top sides in Asia. When you look at after like South Korea, Japan, Iran, etc., Australia, they've been one of the top sides up there with Qatar and all that. We played them in qualification, beat them twice, 1-0 away and at home. What are now the kind of kind of thoughts with this group then? Group C with Iran, with Hong Kong, Palestine. What's going into this tournament? What do you think the plan is for this national team?
Well, as I said, it's quite difficult at the moment to say what are the targets or the objectives for it, just purely because there's so much uncertainty around the national team at the minute. But if you just look at the draw, you would obviously say Iran would be favourites in that group, and then you look at Palestine as going off for the UAE, a pretty difficult test as well. The UAE have played them twice recently and struggled against Palestine, and Palestine will most certainly be motivated for that match. That goes without saying. And they tend to do well against the other Arab teams. So it's not an easy group. And speaking to people at the FA, they understand that it's not a straightforward group at all. As I said, I know Iran have obviously, perhaps they've got a new generation of players that they're looking to integrate as well, and obviously the new manager there. So there's maybe perhaps a little bit uncertainty around them. You would know much more than me on that, but you would still say they would be the front runners, and then the UAE are going to look to try and get that second spot, I would imagine, and you're vying against Palestine, and Hong Kong can't be taken lightly either, because they've got another new manager that's come in. Their results with them around their region have definitely improved. So it's not straightforward, as I said, by any means. And when you factor in everything that's going on behind the scenes with the UAE, that we really it's a difficult one to pinpoint where they're going to be, say in what is it, 7 months time, 8 months time.
Yeah, with the UAE national team, I think people are more familiar with players such as Mabkut and Omar Abdulrahman, who doesn't really seem to play anymore nowadays. What are the kind of key players now with this national team?
Well, you've got the key player probably is still Mabkut, just in terms of he's the record goal scorer. He scored 81 goals, I think it is. Now he's 32. Usually when he plays well, the UAE tend to play well. And the issue with Ali Mabkut, unfortunately, towards the latter stages of World Cup qualification for 2022, he wasn't really performing. Then he wasn't at the Gulf Cup, where the UAE didn't do well at all. They finished bottom of the group just after the Qatar World Cup there. Mabkut wasn't there for technical reasons, was the official reason for him not being there. So he was a big miss, and the UAE struggled to really find someone who could fill that void up front. They've certainly got young, talented players around Mabkut who will play on the wings or maybe play as a number 10, but it really is, if Mabkut's not firing, they struggle to score goals, or struggle to maybe have someone in his place that can open up space and occupy defenders that other players can come in. But of those players that I'm talking about, in terms of the really exciting ones coming through, you've got Harib Abdallah and Yahya Al-Qassani, both wingers, both play at Shabab Al-Ahli, who've just won the UAE Championship. Harib Abdallah he's only 20 now. He's an electric wide man who's got so much pace, so much trickery. He excelled. He scored the winner against South Korea towards the end of qualification for the 2022 World Cup, and he really was the standout player in the playoff last June in Qatar against Australia, which the UAE lost 2-1. But he was the standout, and a lot of the Australian players in the mix zone afterwards were saying to me that they couldn't believe how good he was. So you've got him and Al-Qassani. Al-Qassani is another skillful winger who can bring a little bit of X factor. And then you've got Ali Saleh, who plays for Al Wasl and is now their captain. Ali's very, very young, early 20s as well. So you've got a few guys there that can bring the excitement, but it's really finding not someone to replace Mabkut, but maybe someone who can take the burden off him if he's not performing. And then if I'm looking through the rest of the team, the defence has been a real issue. And you've got full-back position, especially left-back. The UAE have struggled for a good few years now to fill that. And then at centre-back, Walid Abbas, who's been their captain most recently. Walid is 37. So he's certainly not really one for the next cycle. But then again, circumstances may dictate that he still needs to be in there. But yeah, there's a lot of surgery that needs to go on in the team. They need to bring through some new blood, and whether or not they're going to have enough time, because obviously you've got 2026 World Cup qualification and everything, whether or not they're going to have enough time by the time the Asian Cup rumbles around, I'm not overly sure on that.
So, obviously you've already mentioned, a lot of changes. What do you think is going to happen then for this national team? What are your predictions? What are your expectations for this Asian Cup with the players that you guys have, players that you brought in, as you mentioned?
Honestly, it's tough. I know it's not very helpful for the podcast, but it is tough to say where they are at the minute because of they don't have a manager in place, which is going to be the next most important decision made. They want to get someone in relatively quickly, but again, they need to sort out
who are the kind of candidates for the job?
They don't. Now, this is speaking to the guys at the FA last week. They don't have anyone in place because they need to get the board situation sorted out. They need to get the new president in place, and then obviously everything falls into line after that. But from speaking to them around the draw a couple of weeks ago in Doha, they want it to be someone who has experience of Gulf football, and ideally it would be someone with experience of UAE football, but that doesn't always play out that way. But if you're looking forward to the tournament, the UAE have finished in the last four. They've been semi-finalists the last two editions. Obviously, 2015 was I'm not a fan of the phrase, but it was their so-called golden generation where they had Omar Abdul Rahman and Amir Abdul Rahman and Ali Mabkut and Ahmed Khalil. That still remains their best performance on foreign soil. That was Australia, which will be a lot different to Qatar, obviously. But I could see, getting through the group, and then maybe I think they've got the runner-up in Group A, which could be China, Lebanon, or Tajikistan. Maybe you would think that they have a chance then they would fancy their chances going through to the quarterfinals, but I think it might be Japan lying in wait for them, which is no easy task. But let's just see where they'll be maybe in a few months' time once we get through to September, the next FIFA dates. And then we can have an idea of who's in place and what sort of squad and what sort of direction they want to take the team in.
Fantastic, John. I appreciate your time for coming on the podcast again, and always your insight.
Thank you, and I hope everything's a little bit clearer by then. I can give you a bit more of an insight.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate that. All the best.
Arya, thanks a lot. Take care.
I'm joined by Tobias Sousa from offsideHK, covering Hong Kong football. How are you doing, Tobias?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate the time. We had you on before, of course, during the last qualification run in the second round. Iran played against Hong Kong. I think it was 2-0 and there's a 3-1 victory away from home, if I'm not mistaken. Speak to us about your own website, first of all, and what you do for Hong Kong football.
Yeah, so we have been running offside.hk for almost 10 years now. We started in 2014. And yeah, I've been covering all the ups and downs of Hong Kong football. We had, of course, now a very quiet period during the last 3 years in COVID. But yeah, it's picking up again. And of course, now we're also preparing for the Asian Cup. I actually just booked my tickets today. So I will be at least seeing 2 games of the Hong Kong team. And yeah, of course, we will also be covering this on our podcast and then on our website, offside.hk.
Fantastic. Be sure to check that one out. Okay, speak to us about the Hong Kong national team. Again, since we last spoke, what has changed now? Is there any improvements? Is there any differences since then?
Of course, the very big change is the new head coach that came in, Johan Anderson, who replaced Mikso Partelainen. He had quite a difficult start, I would say, because he had to kind of get to know the team during the COVID. And at that time, the league didn't play regularly in Hong Kong. There were no friendly games that could be organized because of all these quarantine restrictions. So he had quite a difficult time. He had to still finish then the Asian Cup qualifiers as well, but did this actually quite successfully. And I think the biggest change so far we have seen is his different approach with the team. So he started on one hand to pick younger players into the team, kind of starting a transformation, and also changing a little bit the expectations how Hong Kong would play. So in the past, it was usually we parking the bus and hope not to concede any goal. This was also, our approach, if you remember, at the 2-0 loss to Iran back in 2019, where they actually held up quite well for a while. But under Jørn Andersen now, it is changing that at least the team tries to play forward. Of course, there are some limitations there in terms of the quality that they have available to them with good strikers. But they are trying to score, and I think this is like the kind of the biggest excitement as well that now fans have been seeing.
And again, since that last World Cup qualification, I'm sure they'll want to push on and do well in the Asian Cup. What are your thoughts on this group with Iran, UAE, and Palestine?
So it's definitely a tough group for Hong Kong. Of course, there were some hopes, to be fair, that Hong Kong would be drawn into a group with China, because this would kind of create all the excitement and the tension that would have added to it. But I think all that said, of course, Hong Kong does not have a good track record against teams from West Asia and Middle East. So there are usually very tough games for them. But then all that said, Hong Kong does not have much to lose. I think there is generally this just a satisfaction that they are at the Asian Cup for the first time in 55 years. And as such, there's no pressure on them, and that hopefully, right, gives them some bit of an underdog power in this group stage as well.
So who are the kind of key players for Hong Kong this time around? Who do you think we should look out for?
Right, so definitely no big names in there, but there are a few younger players that have been coming through in the last few years, especially Matthew Orr, who is like a Hong Konger of half New Zealand descent. So he is currently playing in China League One as a striker, and really has some quality in the last third of the pitch, and this is something that Hong Kong has been missing for a while. We also still have on the horizon two players that might join us on time for the Asian Cup. On one hand, this is Everton Camargo. He is a Brazilian player who has been now in Hong Kong for 7 years, and once they have been in Hong Kong for 7 years, they could qualify to get the Hong Kong passport for naturalization. He is quite interesting because he has been joint top scorer of the Hong Kong Premier League, scoring 17 goals. He's a very fast player and would be greatly helpful for the attack, particularly also when they try to play counter-attack. And also Hong Kong has been looking into getting a passport for a half Hong Kong, half Nigerian player who is just 19 years old. He currently plays in the 3rd division of the German football pyramid for FC Ingolstadt. He currently also plays mostly for their under-19 team. But because he has been growing up in Hong Kong, has one parent of him is also from Hong Kong. So the team is also looking very actively in naturalizing him in the coming months. These are the additional prospects. Other than this, familiar faces are still some of these defenders that we have. 2 of them playing currently in the Chinese Super League. So in the highest top division of China, which definitely is better quality than what you get in Hong Kong. But you would see, compared to the previous years, that the Hong Kong team generally has been getting younger, and also with less naturalized players that are the kind of key performers in the team as of now.
So as a result then, what are the expectations for the Asian Cup? What do you think you can expect to see from this national team?
So as I've mentioned, the style of the team has changed a bit compared to the previous years under Mikdadi as well, and then Kim Pang-gon before that, and Gary White very shortly. So I believe the team also would need to recognize that against opponents like Iran, especially, they might need to rethink this approach. So I would imagine that they will prepare also a more defensive strategy for this game. Of course, I think UAE, even though they're also not as great as or as good as they used to be in recent years, at least, it would still be expected that the opening game against UAE and also against Iran will definitely be very difficult, and we would expect to lose these two games. And I think it really comes down for Hong Kong to the last game against Palestine. And I think also they might see their chances for a possible upset. And given the system of this 24-team Asian Cup, right, that could go as far as actually getting you to the group stages, to the round of 16 as well. So I think, this is more or less the more realistic plan or hopes that we can have, kind of holding up as much as possible, conceding less goals against Iran and UAE, and then hoping for the best in the final match against Palestine. And then we'll see.
So would you be keen to give us a prediction for the group then? What do you think is going to happen in your mind?
So of course, given the odds, Hong Kong would most likely finish last. Ideally, either getting away with 1 point in the last game against Palestine. If I would imagine the best case scenario, then of course the hopes would be Hong Kong would finish third. But of course, no matter what happens, and I think this is the interesting thing I mentioned before, there is no pressure on the team, and that might play a difference in the end, because if Hong Kong finishes last, no one will complain. And if Hong Kong finishes third, it will be a huge story. So maybe this gives them a little bit more motivation as well during the tournament.
Tobias, thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it. Hopefully have you on again for the Asian Cup, and all the best. Take care.
Thanks a lot. My pleasure.
We are joined by Bassil Mikdadi from Football Palestine, a good friend of the podcast. He's been on Spaces before on Twitter. We've had him on to speak about the national team as well with Totally Football Show. How you doing, Bassil?
Doing great, Arya. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Speak to us about your website, Football Palestine. It's been around for quite a long time. What kind of work do you guys do there?
Yeah, so Football Palestine in one iteration or another has been around for 15 years, which is crazy to say. Started as a really modest blog. Started by myself and a friend of mine, and it really started as like a ranting of two fans. And the great thing about the experience is as the Palestinian national team improved and got better, so did our coverage, so did the entity itself. So we started off as a blog spot, if anybody out there remembers those. And then now we've become a proper website. So you can find us at footballpalestine.com. We've got the Twitter, which is our most active social media platform. We're on the other social media platforms as well. And we've recently launched subscriptions through Substack, so our premium subscribers get even more analysis. But yeah, I think we're in the right place at the right time. And the inflection point for us was 2014, when Palestine managed to qualify for their first Asian Cup, the one down in Australia. And we've just gone from strength to strength with coverage and interest. And I was at the Asian Cup in Australia and the past one in UAE, and I'm hoping to be at the 2023 one that's going to be played in 2024, which is not confusing at all.
Fantastic. Make sure you're on your own social media at Football Palestine, right?
That's correct, yeah.
That's right. And you also have covered Iranian football in the past. You've covered them for the World Cups in 2018 and 2022 with the Totally Football Show, as I mentioned. Give us a little bit about that background. What did you do for them?
Yeah, I think if you cover any national team in Asia, you're going to end up with a lot of specific knowledge about teams that in a global sense don't get a lot of coverage, shall we say. Iran, although they are one of the big dogs of Asian football, obviously won the Asian Cup 3 times, have been to the last 3 World Cups, 6 World Cup qualifications overall. Not a lot of people know about them. I think through covering Palestinian football, I got to know the Iranian national team quite well. I've gotten to know other national teams, but I took quite an interest in Iran because, yeah, there's something about the kind of football Iran produces. It's technical, but there's also a physical element to it. There's, you know, the passions of the fans, whether it's in the Azadi Stadium or if they're traveling abroad, like, you know, at the Asian Cup in Australia and the UAE, I saw Iranian fans that, you know, made the national team one of the best supported teams. So I just kind of grew to admire that. And I pretty much tell people that, yeah, outside of Palestine, the team in Asia I enjoy watching the most, for a multitude of reasons. Sometimes it's the football, sometimes it's just the drama surrounding the Iranian national team, happens to be Iran. So when the group was drawn and Iran landed in the same group as Palestine, I was actually very happy to see that.
And you covered that for the Totally Football show as well. How did that go? How did that come about? When did you do that? And how was that kind of program with them?
Yeah, I think the folks at the Totally Football show were looking for people with kind of this like niche, intimate knowledge of national teams that don't get coverage. So they brought me on in 2018. It was quite expensive. They brought me on. I did Saudi Arabia, I did Egypt, I did Iran. And yeah, you know, I won't claim to be an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I think there's so many passionate Iranian football fans that know more than I do, but I like to think of myself as maybe the best Iranian football expert, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and I would agree with that as well. Bassil, let's speak about the Palestine national team. They are in Group C with Iran, UAE, and Hong Kong. What are your thoughts on this national team? Obviously, they've been in good form in the last year or so, and you know, they've got some talented players here and there. They've got, for example, they got Odai Dabag, is that right? Is that how you say his name? Plays in Portugal. What are your thoughts on this national team just now?
Generally positive. Positive since Makram Daboub, the current head coach, took over in April 2021. So believe it or not, he's the most tenured manager in this group, which is really difficult to believe, but so is the nature of Asian football. Since he took over, I think there was a real sea change. Almost leaves us kicking ourselves that we didn't make the change earlier, because I think if we did, we could have rescued our 2022 World Cup qualification campaign. And seeing like the quality of the teams that participated in that third round, I'm thinking of the teams that were in Iran's group, right? There was kind of like a fight not to finish in third place in that group between Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and UAE. I feel that our team could have easily matched, if not exceeded, those standards. And I say that with all due respect to all the teams that were involved in qualifying. So I'm generally positive. Once Makram Daboub took over, you know, the reason why we weren't in the third round wasn't because we didn't get results against the pot 1 and pot 2 teams. We did. We got a win against Uzbekistan to open qualifying. We got a draw against Saudi Arabia that, if you go back and look at the highlights, we could have easily won by not just the odd goal, but maybe even 2 or 3 if we took our chances. The reason we didn't qualify, though, is because we lost to Singapore and to Yemen. And a lot of that has to do with the style of football we played under our former manager, Nuruddin Widad Ali. Very, very negative football tactics. If anybody remembers how like Northern Ireland played under Michael O'Neill, which for some reason won a lot of plaudits, but was absolutely horrible to watch. That's how we played. And you can get results playing against teams that are at your level or a little bit better than you playing that way. But Asian football will not forgive you if you play that way against the weaker teams, because that, you know, in order to actually beat them, you need to really put your imprint on games and show your superiority. And we didn't do that against Singapore or Yemen. Once the coaching change was made and Makram Daboub came along, we blew them out of the water. We beat Singapore 4-0 and Yemen 3-0 to close out qualifying. The Arab Cup was a bit of a mixed bag. We didn't have a full squad because we have so many players playing abroad. But you know, when we regrouped again last year to qualify for the Asian Cup, we had close to a full strength squad, and I think we were the best team in standalone Asian Cup qualifying. Mongolia gave us a hard time in the first game, but then 5-0 against Yemen, 4-0 against Philippines. Yeah, in competitive matches, those last two World Cup qualifiers and these standalone Asian Cup qualifiers, those are 5 games, 5 wins, 0 goals conceded, 17 goals scored. So we're in a good vein of form. We're not playing a lot of games since Asian Cup qualifying last year. We've only played 1 game, which was a friendly against Bahrain. Undermanned squad again, but we managed to beat Bahrain 2-1. So I'm really feeling confident about where this team is going right now.
Yeah, good results as well against the Philippines and Yemen as well. Looking at this squad, then, who would you say are the key players for Palestine for the Asian Cup?
Yeah, so I'll start with the obvious. Allaverdi. I think he might even be on the radar of some Team Melli fans because he's playing in the same league as Mahdi Taremi. And he went to the league. Taremi went to Portugal. He was, I think he just turned 27, so he was something of a late bloomer when he went. And I remember like the talk around Taremi was like, oh, he finally moved, but there wasn't a lot of high hopes for him. And then he developed quite quickly with Rio Ave and got his move to Porto. And I was hoping that this would be the kind of path that Allaverdi would take. And I thought maybe like Porto would sell Taremi and bring Allaverdi was what I was kind of hoping for. And Allaverdi, he did very well in his first season. He didn't make his debut until like a month and a half into the season because of visa issues. He didn't have his work permit. Aroca, the team he plays for, barely survived. His 4 goals and assists in that first season was a solid contribution. It helped them survive the drop. The second season, they had their best ever run in the League Cup, the best ever run in the Cup. They qualified for the Europa League last year. He's their leading scorer across all the competitions. I believe 11 goals this season, despite a contractual dispute, which has kept him out of the squad, despite the fact that, in January, they tried to twist his arm to renew with them with a huge buyout clause, and he said no, and he is going to Charleroi in the offseason, where he will be a teammate of another Iranian player. So Allaverdi for sure is the danger man. You look at his stats for the national team, 10 goals, 5 assists in something like 28 appearances, 27, 28 appearances. So he's the guy who's going to make everything tick in attack. And then the other player that I would really mention is the goalkeeper, Rami Hamadi. And for my money, he is one of the best goalkeepers in Asia. And I recently looked at, he's played 36 games for the national team, 20 clean sheets. He's conceded 25 goals. And these are numbers that, if you kind of compare them with Bezan, who I think is up there as one of Asia's best, they mirror each other. They're almost exactly the same. And if you consider that, Bezan is playing with a much stronger team in front of him, it just shows how impressive Rami Hamadi's numbers are. So, these are the 2 players that I would immediately pick out. But there are other players that are similarly key. The right back, Musab Battat, and the midfielder, Mohammed Rashid, who scored a fantastic goal at Education City Stadium the last time Palestine played there, are also 2 players that are very important in how we build our attacking patterns of play.
Appreciate that. Let's go on to Group C with obviously the Asian Cup, as I mentioned, UAE, Hong Kong as well joining Iran. What do you think of it? Do you think Palestine have a good chance of qualifying the second round from this group? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so look, I don't think it's a secret anymore. The coach tried to walk it back, but I know for a fact behind closed doors, he said this. His assistant before the draw sort of had this opponent circled, and we all wanted Hong Kong, who, I think out of all the 24 teams that are participating, that's the biggest surprise here. I don't want to disrespect anyone. We were once that team that was just happy to be there. That was pretty much our 2015 Asian Cup qualifying campaign. But the results speak for themselves. They're not a team that is going to be able to score a lot of goals against you, and they do struggle against a lot of middle tier opponents. I mean, in qualifying, they lost 4-0 to India, and obviously there's going to be a huge step up in quality when they face us, the UAE and Iran. So happy to get Hong Kong. I think, if everything goes haywire in the first 2 matches, we might be able to rescue qualification in that last game with a win and a couple of goals. Because as we saw in the last edition, 3 points and a decent goal difference can get you through to the round of 16. So I'm confident just by the sheer fact that we have Hong Kong in the group. Now, things got even better for us because my analysis, the analysis of the coaching staff, was the weakest two teams in pot 2 were China and UAE. China, because obviously football, COVID, things haven't been going so well there organizationally over the past couple of years. And UAE, because, they're really at the end of a generation. There's no two ways about it. And they're going to make a coaching change. Rodolfo Robarena is not going to have his contract renewed. And yeah, I respect what UAE has done with this golden generation, especially Ali Mabhout, scored 80-something goals. Scoring goals at the international level is never easy. But, maybe the last time we played, which was during World Cup qualifying for the World Cup in Russia, I would have said, oh, yeah, I really wish we had, this player and this player and this player on our side. Now I look at their squad and I'm not at all envious. And I think if Emirati fans are quite honest with themselves, they would look at our squad and kind of covet some of our players, because older players play in the UAE. We've got players like Javanbakhsh playing in Europe, others that play in Egypt, in other parts of the Arab world. So I'm also happy to have the UAE. And as far as Iran is concerned, look, one of the big boys of Asian football, and a lot of people are saying it could have been worse. It could have been Japan. But that doesn't mean Iran is going to be an easy team to face. You look at the statistics, Iran does not lose games at the group stage of an Asian Cup. The last time that happened was in 1996. And if you look at the last 3 editions, it's been near perfect. They've conceded 1 goal, that was back in 2011 against Iraq in their opening group stage game. And since then, they haven't conceded a goal. And the only result that wasn't a win was a draw in their last group stage game, also against Iraq, which was functionally a dead rubber. They just needed the point to win the group. So yeah, that's how, when we face Iran, I'm not confident that we can get a win. I would say chances are probably 70% that Iran wins that game, 20% draw, and 10% Palestine win. But you never know. I think it's good that we face Iran in the opening match, because that's where you can possibly catch a giant asleep, right? And also, if it stays 0-0 for a while, Iran might say, okay, well, let's take a point from this game and then focus on the games that we have going forward.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting group. I think it's you can never underestimate. I think especially with the new how much these kind of lesser known national teams in Asia are growing. Definitely, I think this edition of the Asian Cup is going to be a little bit more competitive than it has ever been, just because I think everyone's growing as a nation. Every national team in Asia is becoming a lot better. So I'm excited to see how these countries get on. Lastly, then, what are the expectations for Palestine? Obviously, I'm not trying to say, I think you would obviously say yourself, not going to win the Asian Cup, right? But what are the expectations for this national team, and what do you think that you want to see them take away moving forward, going into the qualifications for the World Cup?
Yeah, I think let's start with just reasonable expectations, right? And we can sort of say what the upper limit is. Reasonable expectations is to get at least 4 points from this group. And if you look at and I'm not a big fan of taking historical performance and trying to extrapolate future results. But if you look at historic performance and try to extrapolate, you can see a way where we could get 4 points, a win against Hong Kong and a draw against UAE, or perhaps even a draw against Iran. So I think the bare minimum is to get 4 points. That would be like a 99% guarantee of passing into the knockout stage for the first time ever. If you look at our progress over the last 10 years, we've never peaked at the right time, right? So, in 2014, we qualified for the Asian Cup. We skyrocketed up the rankings. We showed up at the Asian Cup disorganized. There was a coaching change because the FA fell out with Jamal Mahmoud, who led us to the Asian Cup. And we were just really happy to be there. I mean, the games were horrible. We fell out of the top 16, which meant we were a top 3 team for the World Cup qualifying for Russia. Obviously, we bore the brunt of that. We got a difficult group. The same thing happened for this past cycle, which is we reached 73rd in the world. We were 8th best in Asia. the draw wasn't kind to us at the Asian Cup. We made an unnecessary coaching change as well. We stuck with the same coach. And on top of that, we got a tough draw having Saudi Arabia and Uzbekistan in round 2. I'm hoping that this time around we come in actually peaking, and we can use this as a springboard going forward. So I think 4 points is completely within the realm of possibility. Now, if you look at what I think the best case scenario for us is to actually get the second place. So if we can get second place, the way the draw sort of unfolds is that the second place team from our group will play the second place team from Qatar's group. So that's Qatar, China, Lebanon, Tajikistan. And that's, that gives us, I think, an opportunity to maybe even think of maybe we can get to a quarterfinal, which would be huge, right? And then once you're in the quarterfinals, you're only a couple of games away and maybe some sort of miracle can happen, but let's not get into that calculus. So yeah, I think getting out of the group is what we need to do. Maybe the stretch target is a quarterfinal. And then just to take that experience into World Cup qualifying. We have to get into round 3 now. It's an expanded round 3 with 18 teams. We just have to finish in the top 2 of our group. We're guaranteed to be a pot 2 team this time around for World Cup qualifying. So, we actually have to do something, because I think the peaks of Palestinian football have gone unnoticed because we didn't peak at an Asian Cup or we didn't peak at a World Cup qualification. And if you look at our neighbors, they've all done it. Even Lebanon, who, all due respect to them, I don't think is at our level. I think they're a level below. Got into the 3rd round of World Cup qualifying twice for 2014 and for this past World Cup. Syria has done it as well. Jordan has done it as well, also at the Asian Cup. So we need to kind of make that breakthrough where people say oh yeah, this is the year where Palestinian football properly arrived, and it wasn't, they were ranked 70 something at some point in the cycle. It was, no, they did something at an Asian Cup. And if we can take that into World Cup qualifying, that would be great.
So I feel like, in a sense of there's positivity with this national team. You seem very positive. Then as a result of that, give me your prediction for this Asian Cup.
My prediction is, I think it's hard to predict because we're a couple months out. I do think that Palestine will play Iran very hard. But to get a win requires a little bit of luck, right? It requires Mahdi to have an amazing game. And then maybe, I don't know, Iran has an off day and we can get a win. But I really think that that's probably a step too far. It probably will be a well-fought game that Iran finds a way to win in. But I think even in potential defeat, if we can change the opinions of some neutrals, of the Iranian fans, of how they perceive Palestinian football, then that would be huge. I think we can beat UAE, and I think we can beat Hong Kong quite easily. So I think we finished second place in this group. And then I'll stop there. I won't make any other predictions past that, but I think we can finish second place in this group. And the important thing from a personal perspective for me is, I think the absolute rock bottom we hit as a national team was back in 2011. We played Iran in a friendly in Tehran. We lost 7-0. But that defeat caused the FA to actually take some actions. They appointed Jamal Mahmoud. We improved steadily. And out of that defeat came our first Asian Cup qualification. And you sort of saw, although it was another friendly, so I don't want to read in too much into the result, you sort of saw the progress the next time the teams met, which was just before the 2019 Asian Cup, and Palestine got a 1-1 draw against Iran. So the progress is quite tacit. It's there. But I think a lot of Iranian fans still remember the 7-0 and still see us as that team that lost 7-0. So if we can also change perceptions amongst Iranian fans, that would also be a huge win as well.
Bassil, I appreciate your time for coming on the podcast. Good to have you on. Good to hear your insight on the Palestine national team, a true expert on it. And again, we'll hopefully have you on again when the Asian Cup starts.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Hopefully we can get together again once the Asian Cup draws a little bit closer.
Perfect. Appreciate it, man. Thanks again to Bassil, Tobias, and John for their time and great insight into the respective national teams. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Remember, if you wish to donate to Goal Bezan, our Patreon is now active at patreon.com/GoalBezan. Check out our social media at Goal Bezan and our website goalbezanpodcast.com. We're back very soon covering the end of the domestic season in Iran. For now, take care and see you soon.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray from ESPN and EA Sports. You're listening to Goal Bezan Podcast.